Welcome, everybody, to the Growth Execution podcast and indeed vidcast, as it is right now. I'm joined by Mike Killen of Sell Your Service. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Mel. Hey, how you doing?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. Very well. So, look, we are changing things up slightly. This is the beginning of the third season of the Growth Execution podcast.
Wow.
We have spent 32 long episodes ago. We started out in the dim distance of 2018 or something, and a couple of things happened since then, I think, from memory.
Sure.
Look, the first one was all about the process, all about how you grow your business. Second one was all about what the hell happened with the pandemic. Now we're looking ahead. Right, we're looking at how others coming into a new circumstance, new situation, might be looking to launch their businesses. And we're joined by great entrepreneurs, people who have been through that process themselves and are here to help us all to learn a bit more about how they managed it. So, Mike, I wonder if I can just take you back to when this all began.
Sure.
And when did you start it and why?
So I started my first business when I was made redundant in 2012 from a big data company. This was back when no one really knew what social media was. No one really knew what digital marketing was. Like, it seemed to be this kind of its own separate thing. Events were still very much the way that corporate marketing was run. And I kind of convinced the directors that I was like, I can take on the digital marketing. So I became the UK and Nordics head of digital for like this huge data conglomeration, like proper wangled my way in there.
Well done,
and it seemed to go okay. And for about, I don't know, a couple of years. And then their stock price plummeted. Like, they fired like 10,000 people overnight.
Wow.
And I became very disillusioned.
One of your marketing campaigns didn't go so well.
Yeah, it was a bad campaign. It was real bad. Yeah, one typo. One typo.
Catastrophic.
Yeah. Well, I split my time between here and Helsinki, and I was actually flying back when everyone got that kind of Black Friday letter.
Right.
And so I arrived at the office, and there was literally no one there, and I was like, "Where the hell is everyone?" And it turns out I'd been fired like 24 hours beforehand, but just hadn't been told about it. So it was a whole thing, and I became very disillusioned with it. So I literally called up my mum because at the age of, how old I'd been, 24, 25, you don't save a lot of money back then. You kind of just spend it all. And I was like, look, I need somewhere to stay. So she rented a van. We grabbed all of my stuff from my flat. Wow. And I basically moved in with her, and she had moved down to Devon. And I was like, well, I don't want to get a job again. I certainly don't want to work for another corporate company. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to start a marketing agency. And we tried anything and everything. And for a few years, it was all right. And then 2016, I then sold that agency to a larger larger media agency, sorry.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah, well, it was interesting because all we did was we just became hyper focused. And that, I think, is probably something that's going to come up on this call a lot. Is I became hyper specific about the niche that I was going after and the service that I provided. There was a team of about 5 of us, maybe, including myself. So we were very, very small. And this media company basically, again, kind of just wanted our process. So I was glad to kind of hand it over to them. And then I was like, well, I don't really know what I want to do now. And a friend of mine said, well, come out to the States, give a couple of talks. And what I was really good at, and was what I do now, is selling basically websites for 10 grand, marketing services for 25 grand, selling products and services for a higher sum than a lot of freelancers and smaller businesses were used to. They just weren't used to charging that kind of money. And the number one question that came up was, how could I possibly sell a website for 10 grand? And I was like, that's easy. I'll show you. In fact, that's kind of a bit behind me on the board, actually, weirdly enough, some other training I was doing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how I started Sell Your Service. I just kind of started teaching people how to sell marketing funnel projects and marketing services for at least 25 grand. And it's really just grown from there.
Brilliant. And so you obviously kind of, I guess it's a kind of coaching thing, right? Almost, being willing and comfortable talking about some numbers that entrepreneurs, I guess, kind of feel they probably have to work their way up to.
Yeah, there's this weird kind of like misconception or myth or belief, I don't know, that like on an XY axis, experience equals price. And it's just not true. Like, it's not true by a long shot. There's so many examples where it's not true. And the funny thing is when you speak to someone who's been doing it for 10 years, I'm like, well, you should be charging on the higher end of the scale, and they're not. And that's actually across, I think, all industries. I think all industries suffer from that, this underpricing and undervaluing process. So it's as much about learning the actual process of how do you physically pitch and market and message and close a 25K deal, or any number. The numbers are relevant, but also how do you internally justify that price? And that's, in some respects, a bigger, like a mental barrier that people have to get over.
So it's more a mindset almost, you talk about money mindset, and the kind of I'm valued and I'm worth what this much, and that's the kind of thing that people aren't used to talking about.
Yeah, and I know that you and I have spoken about this, and the circles that we run in have spoken about this, and I know you have spoken about this, but that first initial understanding, like, yeah, I'm allowed to charge this, someone's going to give me permission, internally I'm allowed to do it. But just from a basic mathematical standpoint, like, if you want to, the first big milestone that people want to get to is 6 figures, right? And if you want £100,000 business, do you want to sell 25 4 grand products, or whatever the number is, or do you want to sell 4 25 grand products? I know which I'd rather sell, and I know which is easier, but it's that initial mind set, kind of that block, that barrier that's like, oh, well, it's different for me, or for whatever reason. And I know you've spoken about that, but it's funny. It seems to be prevalent across all industries and all peoples.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, you can kind of talk about the British Reserve and things like that. And is it actually something that is native to these islands, or is it actually something that's far broader? And I think, people, entrepreneurs that I've come across, it as you say, it's widespread. It's almost kind of 90% of people who will almost default to a low figure because they're kind of, it's that tough conversation. And how do you get people to feel that they're worth that?
Yeah, and the deeper I get into this, the more, and you and I get on pretty well, so we can get more philosophical and sort of metaphysical about this kind of stuff. So one of the company values that Sell Your Service has is have courage. It's at the end of every single one of my emails. I say at the end of all my videos, and the longest term for that is have the courage to be disliked. And I believe that that's pretty much the number one thing that you need to become comfortable with if you want to start doing what you want to do. And pricing is a really good reflection of just how much courage you have to be disliked, because it's essentially saying to the world, I'm worth this much. Like, only the other day, I had someone say, oh, can we call you up for like an hour can we get some consultation? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. It's £397 for the hour. And they were like, ooh, we weren't expecting it to be that much. And I was like, okay, well, that's the price. I'll see you later. And ultimately, it's because I don't care whether they like me or not. It's irrelevant whether they like me or not. And I think a lot of people are afraid that if they put that price out there, and if one person says, that's crazy expensive, I don't like you, then everyone's going to say that. And it's just not true. That's one person's opinion. And that's, in my opinion, the first big hurdle. And it's funny that something as calculated as price comes down to this very human desire to be liked.
Yeah, and it resonates also, or is reflected also, I think, in sales. So I'd spend a lot of time on sales. Overall, that's probably where the most help is required in the entrepreneurs that I'd speak with, because they're generally very comfortable with product and building product. That's what they're here to do. That's the calling. That's the thing. Then marketing is, it's creative, it's quite fun, it's still relatively seller pursuit, and nobody tells you that they hate you. But sales, you go out and you say to somebody, I've got this, do you want it? And they say no. It's like, that's a mortal blow. That is really personal. So I think it is that kind of it's almost sales coaching, isn't it? Really, it is sales coaching. It is about that ability. It's the numbers game. It's knowing that out of 10 conversations, one is going to say yes, but you have to get through those other 9 and just be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and you've hit such a good point there, that entrepreneurs as a breed are great idea machines, but often those ideas are, and I'm the same, right? It would be ludicrous of me to say the otherwise, but they're very personal to us. Those ideas, the things we create, we give birth to them, we put energy into them, and to have someone reject them is hurtful. But it's almost a case of like, well, I just have to have faith and presume that one person's going to find this extremely useful, like almost life-changingly useful, and I've got to go through a bunch of people who can't see that in order to find that one person. And are you willing to put up with being disliked by 9 people, or worse than that, ignored? I think apathy is worse than being disliked, perhaps.
You're absolutely right. It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's something that entrepreneurs have to learn is close the deal and rake in the money.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right. It's about, and I kind of liken it to you take your baby out, right? So you just got a newborn baby, and you take it out in its little pram, and you show it to somebody, and somebody goes, "That is an ugly baby." Everyone goes, "No, it's my baby." And that's another reason why I try as much as possible to avoid getting entrepreneurs on early calls with potential clients. When you're doing the research about product market fit, because at that point, what you want is this really brutal feedback that says, you need to do this, you need to fix that. But already there's that justification of, oh no, we thought about doing that because of this, and you know what I mean? And it's just like, no, back away. Just let it happen. But it is fascinating, the psychology of it.
Yeah, and I was watching, I don't know what it was on Netflix. You just consume Netflix now because you're not allowed to go outdoors or anything. So it was something to do with interior design, and the brief was to design a house or something that could be put on the market, and it was a show home. So to me, show home means magnolia and brown, like keep it safe, right? And all of these interior designers wanted to put like their spin on it, their design, and like, this is my style. And they were like, you've completely missed the brief here. It's not about you. Your product has got nothing to do with you. The customer is the one who determines the value, and that's a very hard and bitter pill to swallow. But I think once you can get your head around that, and you think it's actually not about me trying to show how smart I am, and I fall into this trap still. I'm like, people are going to think that this product is going to be life-changing. My genius knows no bounds when I release it, and it flops. No one buys it.
Just wait.
And I'm like,
just wait till I press this button.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. And sure enough, it just doesn't sell as well as I think it is. And yet, when I email my clients and I say, what would you want help with more than anything else? And they say, oh, we'd love to learn more about hiring a team. I'm like, that seems like such an obvious thing. Absolutely, I should be doing that. We create a course, we sell it, it sells like gangbusters. And what does that take? An email and the ability to listen and read? It's a delicate balance between those two sides.
Quite, yeah, because you can get kind of overwhelm of feedback as well.
Sure.
It's a very dangerous thing too. There's that fabulous quote from Henry Ford from back in the day saying, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, constantly, I think, you've got to be so careful about throwing that question out there. So come on guys, what do you want? Because you will get so much information, but you've got to go out with this idea of, I'm here to do this job, I'm here to solve this problem, and that is what I exist for, that's what this business exists for. And then it's almost finding ways of doing that in tandem with your audience, but certainly not just doing it by committee, because that is an awful place to be, right?
Yeah, and it'll kill your business as well, because you don't have the resources to test stuff after it's built. That's why we try to sell something and then build it first. Like, that's the way around we tend to do stuff, just to try and eliminate that.
So fly the kite and see how it goes, and see what comes through. And think about kind of your journey and how you have got here. What kind of made you, and you've mentioned, you talked about the situation you were in. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Was it always something that you kind of knew was inside you?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, it was. No, it's funny because you hear stories and people are like, oh, I was selling sweets at school and selling like cards and stuff. And I never did that. I knew that I wanted to, in fact, for years, I was a chef. I trained as a chef and committed to training as a chef and worked in France. And, that was the career path that I had chosen. And at one point I was like, I'm sick of this. I developed quite a bad drug problem as well, which is pretty common in the trade, to be honest. So that's not just me, and I was like, I want a job with air conditioning. So I kind of was like, well, I'll just work in sales and marketing. So
That's the best reason for going into sales I've heard, I think.
Yeah, legitimately, that
It's not
was
the
it.
money.
Well,
It's the
no.
aircon.
Well, the funny thing is my first job had great air conditioning because I was a door-to-door salesperson for Sky TV. That was
Can't get much better than the open air, right?
right. And along the process, now being an entrepreneur or starting a business, I had so little idea of how to do it that as I was leaving the office, one of the consultants, he might have been from Deloitte, I can't remember, one of the consultants that was working with us, I was like, look, I'm going to go start a business. And he was like, cool. Do you know how to register on Company's House? And I was like, what the hell is Company's House? So he had to physically sit down with me. Richard, his name was, I remember it. He sat down with me and he was like, oh, it's 13 quid. You register the name. And I was like, oh, there we go. It's a business now. Wow. So I personally I didn't think I would ever come down this path, which is, I think, maybe a bit different. A lot of people know, and now you can. Now it's like a legitimate thing. Everyone wants to do it. But back when I was at school, no, it was. I mean, I'm curious to know for yourself as well, because it seems to become more and more accessible, but even only in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I often say that now is the best time in this universe ever to be doing this stuff, right? Yeah. The accessibility, in fact, we can have this conversation and it be publicized out, and all that stuff has just come together to make this just a perfect time to launch a business. There are also obviously macro factors at play in terms of a lot of people coming off furlough, some people made redundant, some people who just look around and go, I don't want anybody else to have this level of control in my life anymore, because this is too scary. I don't know what's going to happen. So I think all of those things that are coming together. Look, for me, I was lucky enough to be part of some startups back in the day, Zupa Communication and so on. So I kind of had the startup bug from working with some really incredible entrepreneurs. That's and cool. So lucky to do that. And then, trying to kind of take those learnings on. And, the biggest challenge that I faced when I set up a couple of businesses in the early 2010s, was more than getting investment or talking to the right people. It was the nuts and bolts. It was kind of like, well, how do you, like you say, how do you sign up to Company's House? How do you how do you get your content together? How do you set a sales target? How do you look for your USP? All that stuff was just really hard. And that's obviously what we're trying to do here, is just kind of get that kind of process together. But I think for me, it was really that kind of that driver to partly to make sure that I was sharing some knowledge that I had that built up over time, but also I didn't want to work for anybody else, really.
Well, I became very disillusioned, and I was like, I don't. The story is, you go to uni, you get a good job, and you work your way up. And
I read that one as well.
Right. And they were like, oh, by the way, we don't need to come in. We don't need to pay you severance, because technically the job role you've only had for 6 months. Like, they changed the job role. And I was like, is this a joke? And what's funny is, now setting up a business, everyone who I used to work with at that company has gone off and joined other companies, but my company still exists. Mm-hmm. The concept of job security, I don't think exists anymore. And setting up a business is a legitimate way, I think, to start taking control. Just as you said, starting taking a little bit of control back. It has its own, of course, it has tons of risks and pitfalls, but it's crazy to me how easy it is to set something up and just start making money. Like, it's very exciting to me, that prospect.
Yeah, likewise. And thinking back to your 2012 self, what would be the one piece of advice your 2020 self would give?
Yeah, it would, and I know exactly what it would be. It would be, pick a niche and pick a product. Really, really get deep into that niche, and beyond just saying, because everyone goes, oh, I want to work with small businesses. I'm like, cool. Mm-hmm. It's like 99% of GDP. Like, this, and they go, okay, well, yeah, exactly. And they're like, well, I want to work with, but they would say, I want to work with service businesses. I'm like, okay, fine. That's kind of like 75% of the businesses in the UK alone, at least. You need to be way more specific about that. And our first big breakthrough was when we worked specifically with insurance companies that had lots of blog content, and we would help convert blog readers into email subscribers. And that was the niche. The niche was the industry, the problem, the thing they were experiencing. So if I was able to talk to 2012 self, I would say stop doing everything for anyone, and I wouldn't even give myself that niche. I'd say you need to find a hyper-specific group of people and a hyper-specific problem for that group of people, and just do everything you can to generate attention in that place. And every time we did that, we then did it for course creators. Now I do it just for marketing funnel agencies, which is something that, unless you're a marketing funnel agency, you wouldn't have even heard of. But anyone who comes across me and they are a funnel builder, I'm like the most useful resource on the planet to them, because there's no one else addressing that market. So yeah, personally, it would be pick a niche.
Go very specific, kind of drill right deep into that. And I know that I've seen your group, which has got thousands of people in it. I've seen your videos and so on, and it's an education in that very, very specific way of going about business. And it's, like you say, you can charge 25 grand for one if you get it right. That's got to be that's why those people are flocking.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing, because like it's not even saying that you can only help those people. It's purely a resources issue. Like, I don't doubt that every business on the planet would benefit talking to you or this example person we've got. I'm sure they would do, but you're not Google, you're not Apple. You don't have those resources to be able to cater to all those people. So why not just pick one hyper-specific audience that you want to have a conversation with and answer the same questions day in, day out, and work with them. And I think you attract opportunities from other areas when you are niched and specific. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of marketing from companies today.
Yeah, because I think people do self-identify with certain groups, certain tribes, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really strong thing. Online tribes is huge.
Yeah.
And obviously Seth Godin is kind of the legend. Yeah. Seth Godin of brilliant at identifying those audiences. And what kind of values or what unites your tribe? What is it that when you look at them personality-wise, rather than necessarily what their function is, or is there a unifying feature?
Yeah, I think there are. I think one of the big ones is that so if we want to talk about some negative and positive characteristics, I think one of the negative ones, and they'll all admit to this, is they all have a pretty bad case of shiny object syndrome. They all want to be first-time adopters. They all want to buy the latest piece of kit and buy the latest piece of software. Like, if you Google like funnel software or funnel platform, there are dozens of them, and there's one being released, it seems, every single month. So that's one thing that I try to be like, you need to stop buying software. You need to stop buying stuff in general, frankly. Another thing is they tend to come from a not that dissimilar journey where they've had a job and they've set up a marketing agency or some kind of design agency or digital agency. And they're now thinking, I've been doing this for a few years now. I don't seem to have all the stuff that I want. How do I get that? How do I start achieving that lifestyle that was kind of promised to me? There's a lot of stuff that connects them, but those are probably the two biggest ones.
Got it. And in terms of the kind of the sort of frequency with which you engage with these guys, do you do a kind of regular? Is it a webinar? Or, is it weekly? What's your kind of cadence when it comes to speaking to people?
I'm pretty relentless. So it's actually my full-time job is just creating content. So I'll email them every single day. So we send a daily email 7 days a week. We have a weekly podcast. We have a weekly YouTube video and a weekly blog post. And we probably do webinar training. Well, we actually have one like strategy session that runs once a week that people can just like book into. That's run by someone else. And then we have, probably, I don't know, monthly to bi-monthly. Is that every 2 months?
I can never work it out.
No, I don't know. Yeah. Every 2 months. I do 6 a year. There we go. Like of webinars, going deeper into it. But we also have a weekly paid coaching call, and that's probably the bread and butter of my income outside of the courses.
Okay. And that's what, an hour with people who are on the kind of like a masterclass or whatever of people who are really into
Yeah.
Got it. And in terms of who would you say, or is there anybody that you would say is a kind of inspiration for you? Do you look around and see kind of other entrepreneurs and say, that's the kind of not necessarily life, but just kind of attitude approach that I want to replicate?
Yeah, 100%. Mike Michalowicz. He's probably my number one hero at the moment. He wrote a book called Profit First, and in his other business called Run Like Clockwork, which is run by his business partner Adrienne Dorison, and she as well is a big influence on me. Their predominant focus is allowing entrepreneurs to build their business in a way where they can take a 4-week holiday. It's not about, working abroad or necessarily like working from a beach or not ever working, and having this kind of easier life, but through that process of setting up a business in a way where you're able to take a holiday and still make money. Because a lot of people, a lot of business owners, if they stop working, they stop making money, which means they don't really have a business. It means that they basically own their job, right? So their company, Run Like Clockwork. And last year I had the privilege of speaking on stage with him, which was kind of the equivalent of like, oh, you're here to see the Beatles, like Mike McAllowitz, and now we've got like some other support band coming on afterwards. So
but you got up on stage with the Beatles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so that was my main takeaway. Yeah, so he's absolutely up there. I'm a big fan of Oren Klaff as well from a sales perspective. I think his pitching is very solid. I don't know if he's got like the lifestyle that I want, but yeah, probably Mike McAllowitz and Adrienne. They're probably up there. Yeah.
Brilliant. And what is it that keeps driving you? You mentioned about a lifestyle, or where you want to get to. What's the big goal?
Yeah. Do you know it's only recently changed? But I think you did you see my email? Was that from that was from you?
Yes,
a reply?
I did yesterday, the day before. Yeah.
No, so
really strong, really powerful.
Beginning of lockdown, my stepfather like suddenly passed away, and thank you. It's obviously it was I'd never experienced a close family death like that, especially like an immediate tragic one that was like sudden, And the truth is, I don't think I did have a huge amount of clarity around what I was doing and why. And when you boil it down, it's just to give my family the best life that I can. I genuinely don't care about the fast cars and the big houses and stuff. I don't have a problem with making a lot of money. Like, I'm fine with that. But it really has become like not only giving my family the best, but also I just want to make sure that other people can give their family the best. Like, ultimately, that's really the only thing that matters across the board, to me at least. So that was very interesting that kind of shook up, and I took a bit of time off after that. And having a conversation with a few people, they've said, yeah, it's a very sudden shift in perspective. And I was like, yeah, I want the houses and the cars, and we're going to travel and all of this stuff. And 2020 has just been a year. It's like, you can't travel anywhere. I'm like, all right, fine. so yeah, being able to give that to other people. And that's really it. Like, I don't like creating content every single day. I have to do it, and it's part of the business. But like anything, you don't love your job 100% of the time. But if there's one thing that does keep me going, it's like, if just one person reads this and it allows them to make a little bit more money so they can support their family, fine. That'll be worth it. So that's probably the deepest driving purpose, which I don't know, maybe that was too deep for the podcast. No, I don't know. That was
just a wonderful thing. And that's a great one to kind of to sort of draw to a close. And I think that's really, really powerful. And thanks so much for sharing the story with us as well. I wondered, so as we kind of come to the end of this particular conversation, and I'd love to continue this conversation and come back to you in due course as well. What are you up to after this? What's the kind of day? What's the rest of your day look like?
Yeah, the rest of the day is, funny enough, shooting another YouTube video. I think I mentioned my computer exploded just before we jumped on, so I'll probably have to go and fix that. But yeah, I'll probably be shooting a YouTube video and then sending over some training material to my staff who are... I've slowly realised I'm the least valuable member of my team. So much stuff gets done when I'm nowhere near it. Which
is where the 4-week holiday comes.
Right, yeah. So, to the point where they're like, he's back now. Like, everything's going to grind to a halt.
Getting in the way.
Yeah. So I'll go and send them some training materials. But I think a bit more video content. Yeah. How about you? What are you up to today?
So actually, I've got to jump on a meeting right now, which is
right. We'll wrap it up then.
Yes, I've got another couple of meetings with clients coming up, and keeping busy. It's it's as we come towards the end of sort of 2020. It's been a very, very different year, isn't it? But,
yeah.
I think if you've got the kind of commitment, and obviously you and your colleagues there are showing it too, I think there's stuff to be done, right?
Awesome. Yeah, man. Totally agree.
Good stuff. Listen, Mike, so good to have you on
You too.
the podcast.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We will catch up soon, I'm sure. Anybody got any questions? Anybody want to speak with Mike? He's at cellularservice.co.uk. Great business. Wonderful guy. And yeah, we'll look forward to catching up and seeing how you go, mate.
Appreciate it. Cheers, Mal.